The crowd in the palace courtyard stood frozen, their laughter cut short. The prince, tall, proud, and dressed in gold embroidery, had just fallen to his knees before the very woman he had once mocked. His face was pale, his voice trembling. "Please," he begged, clutching her hands, "forgive me, save my people." Before him stood Adana, the young woman whose full, rounded chest he had once made the subject of cruel jokes before the entire village. The same woman he had called a mockery of beauty. The same one he had humiliated so badly that even the children repeated his insults in the marketplace. Now, his voice cracked with desperation. The royal guards glanced at each other in shock. Even the elders could not believe the sight before them, royalty lowering himself to beg a woman he had scorned. But Adana's eyes were cold. She turned her face slightly, looking at him without saying a word. Her silence was sharper than a spear. And then the ground beneath them shook. The village of Amuaka was a place of music, color, and tradition. At dawn, the roosters crowed in chorus. The women fetched water from the stream with pots balanced gracefully on their heads, and the children played chasing games in the red dust streets. Evenings were for storytelling under the ancient Udala tree, where elders wove tales of bravery, kindness, and foolishness. Adana was a daughter of Matsio Koro, a humble but well-respected palm wine tapper. Her mother, Mama Ifioma, was known for her gentle voice and sharp wisdom. Adana herself was blessed, or, as some whispered, cursed, with a figure that drew attention everywhere she went. Her breasts were unusually large, and though she had grown into her womanhood with grace, many could not see past her chest. Some men stared openly, some women whispered behind her back, and children, repeating what they heard at home, sometimes giggled or sang mocking rhymes. Adana had learned to keep her head high. She worked on her family's farm, wove beautiful raffia mats, and cared for her younger siblings. But she could never escape the feeling that people's eyes always landed on her chest before her face. In Amuaka, beauty was highly prized, but was also narrowly defined. Slim-waisted maidens with modest figures were considered the ideal. Adana was different in a way that made her unforgettable, but also made her the target of judgment. One warm market day, a grand announcement spread through the village. Prince Obina, the heir to the throne of Amuaka, was returning from his travels. He had been away in the neighboring kingdoms, learning from their chiefs and warriors, and now he was back to choose a bride. The whole village buzzed with excitement. Young women adorned themselves with beads, perfumed oils, and new wrappers. Mothers coached their daughters on how to walk gracefully, how to serve palm wine elegantly, how to smile without showing too much eagerness. Adana, however, had no interest in competing for the prince's attention. She told her mother, "If the prince is wise, he will choose a wife with a good heart, not someone who is only beautiful to the eye." Her mother smiled. "Yes, my daughter, but remember, not all men are wise." On the day of the prince's welcome feast, the village square was decorated with bright fabrics and calabashes of fresh palm wine. Drummers beat their talking drums, and dancers swayed to the rhythm. The air was thick with the smell of roasted goat meat and fried plantains. Adana went with her family, wearing a simple but clean wrapper and a blouse she had sewn herself. She tried to stay at the edge of the crowd, away from the cluster of maidens competing for the prince's gaze. But fate had other plans. As the prince walked through the crowd, greeting the people, his eyes fell on Adana. He stopped, his gaze traveling slowly from her face to her chest, and then, before the entire crowd, he smirked. "Well," he said loudly, "I see the gods have blessed you, perhaps too generously." The crowd erupted in laughter. The prince continued, "Tell me, do you use those to store palm wine? Or do you carry secret treasures inside?" Adana froze. Her cheeks burned. Every laugh felt like a slap to her face. She could feel eyes piercing into her like arrows. Even her little brother, Chaik, tugged at her wrapper, whispering, "Sister, let's go home." But the prince wasn't done. "If I marry you," he said with a mocking grin, "I will have to build a bigger doorway, so you can fit through." The laughter was deafening now. Adana's father stepped forward, his face hard with anger, but Adana gently held his arm. She would not let him speak. Not here. Not now. She simply turned and walked away, her head high, though her heart was shattering inside. That night, Adana sat in the darkness outside her home, staring at the stars. Her mother joined her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "My child," she said softly, "a man who insults what he does not understand is a man who will one day need what he's rejected." Adana turned to her mother. "What do you mean?" Mama Ifioma smiled faintly. "You will see. The world has a way of bringing the proud to their knees." Adana said nothing, but a fire began to grow quietly in her heart. The next morning, a strange rumor began to spread through Umuka. Something terrible had happened in the palace. The sun had barely risen when the royal gong sounded in the village square. The deep metallic gong, gong, meant only one thing: urgent news from the palace. Villagers dropped their baskets, left their cooking fires, and rushed to the square. The palace messenger stood on the raised platform, sweating and breathing hard, as if he'd run all the way from the royal gates. He raised his hand for silence. "People of Amuaka," he shouted, his voice cracking, "the prince is gravely ill." A loud murmur ran through the crowd. The messenger continued. "He woke up in the middle of the night, screaming in pain. His chest burns, his breath is short, and his skin has turned ashen. The royal healers have tried every herb, every root, every charm, but nothing works." Gasps and fearful whispers filled the air. Illness in a prince was not just a family matter. It could be a bad omen for the entire kingdom. Then the messenger's voice grew even more urgent. "The palace elders have consulted the oracle. The oracle says that the cure lies in the hands of a woman, one who carries a mark of the gods in her body. Without her, the prince will die within 7 days." Everyone leaned forward, eyes wide. "A mark of the gods? What kind of mark?" someone shouted. The messenger hesitated, then said, "The oracle described her as a young woman, blessed with an unusual chest. Large, very large." The crowd went silent. All eyes slowly turned toward one person, Adana. Her heart skipped a beat. "Me," she whispered to herself. Mama Ifioma's eyes narrowed. "It seems the gods waste no time in teaching lessons," she said quietly. Adana's father stepped protectively in front of her. "My daughter is not some tool for the palace to use when it suits them." But before they could say more, 2 royal guards approached. They bowed slightly, but their tone was firm. "Adana, daughter of Matsuo Koro, you are summoned to the palace by royal command." Adana's mind swirled. Her first instinct was to refuse. "Tell the prince," she said evenly, "that my chest is not a storage room for remedies, and my heart is not a door to be opened only in times of trouble." The guards looked at each other nervously. "Miss, this is not a request," one of them said. "If you refuse, it will be seen as disobedience to the crown." The crowd was buzzing now, some with pity, others with mischief. "Go and let him beg you," an old woman muttered. "Pride can only be cured with shame." Mama Ifioma touched her daughter's hand. "Go," she said softly, "but go on your own terms. Let them see your worth, not just your body." Adana stood tall, took a deep breath, and nodded. "Fine, I will go to the palace, but not to heal his pride. If the gods want to save him, they will show me how." By mid-afternoon, she was standing at the massive wooden gates of the palace. The guards pushed them open, revealing a long path lined with carved statues of past kings and warriors. The air was heavy with the smell of incense. The royal physician met her at the entrance of the prince's chambers. "We have tried everything," he said quickly. "The fever does not break. The prince barely breathes. His heart beats like a drum about to split." They led her into the room. Prince Obina lay on a bed covered in fine silk, his once proud face pale and sweaty. His eyes fluttered open at the sound of footsteps, and when he saw Adana, his lips trembled. "You," he croaked, his voice weak but full of something he had never shown her before, fear. Adana did not answer. She simply stood by his bedside, her arms folded. The royal healer stepped forward. "The oracle says a cure can only be prepared if you—" But before he could finish, the ground beneath them began to rumble. A strange wind blew through the room, though the windows were shut. The candles flickered violently, and a voice, deep and echoing, filled the air. It was the oracle speaking through the wind, and what it said next made everyone in the room gasp. The wind howled to the prince's chambers, swirling the curtains and rattling the wooden beams above. The air grew cold, and even the guards who prided themselves on bravery took a step back. Then came the voice, deep, resonant, and commanding, as if it spoke from the belly of the earth itself. "Adana, daughter of Okoro, the fate of the prince lies in your hands." Everyone turned to look at her. The royal physician clutched his staff, muttering prayers under his breath. The voice continued, "The illness is no ordinary sickness. It is the curse of Okuk NSI, the jealous spirit of beauty. The prince's pride and mockery of the god creation have angered this spirit, and only the one he insulted can break the curse." Prince Obina's eyes widened, his breathing shallow. "Curse," he whispered. I only spoke words." The voice boomed again. "Words carry power. Your words brought shame upon one who carries a sacred blessing, the blessing of abundance. To be cured, the prince must drink from the sacred water that lies in the cave of whispering stones. And Adana must be the one to fetch it." Gasps filled the room. The cave of whispering stones was a place of legend, dark, dangerous, and said to be home to creatures that fed on fear. No one from the village had dared enter it in many years. The voice lowered, but its words were even more chilling. "But beware, Adana. The path to the cave will test your courage, your patience, and your heart. You will be mocked again. You will be tempted, and only if you remain unshaken will you return with the cure. Fail, and the prince will die." The wind died down. The candle steadied. The room fell silent, except for the sound of the prince's labored breathing. Adana looked at the prince. He looked smaller now, not the arrogant man who would mock her, but frightened boy, his pride stripped away. His voice cracked. "I was wrong. I should not have—" His words trailed off, swallowed by a shallow breath. Adana turned to the elders. "If I agree to this journey, I do it for the sake of the kingdom, not for him." Her voice was steady, though her heart pounded. The oldest elder, a woman with silver hair and eyes like deep water, nodded slowly. "Sometimes the gods choose us for a reason we do not yet see. Will you go, Adana?" She hesitated for a moment, then said, "I will." The next morning, before the sun had fully risen, Adana set out from the palace gates. She wore a simple wrapper tied above her chest, a leather pouch slung across her shoulder, and a small charm her mother had pressed into her hand before she left. The villagers gathered to watch her go. Some looked at her with pity, others with doubt. One man muttered, "Why risk your life for someone who shamed you?" Adana ignored them. She kept walking. But barely an hour into her journey, as she crossed the edge of the forest, she heard voices behind her. "Look, it's the girl with the mountains on her chest." Laughter followed, cruel and sharp, echoing the same words that had once come from the prince himself. Adana froze. She could turn back and hurl insults. She could defend herself. But the oracle's warning rang in her mind. "You will be mocked again. Only if you remain unshaken will you return with a cure." She straightened her back, clenched her fists, and kept walking, never looking over her shoulder. But the road ahead was long, and soon the real danger began to show itself. A shadow moved in the trees, silent but watching. The air grew colder, and the forest grew so quiet she could hear her own heartbeat. And then, from behind the thick bushes, something stepped onto the path. From the bushes stepped a tall, wiry man with skin the color of wet charcoal and eyes that glowed faintly yellow in the dim forest light. He wore a long, tattered robe made of animal hide, and on his head sat a crown woven from bones and feathers. In his right hand, he held a staff carved with twisting patterns that seemed to move on their own. Adana stopped in her tracks. She had heard the old stories. This was no ordinary man. This was Akpoko, the forest trickster, a spirit who appeared to travelers to either help them or destroy them. The trickster grinned, revealing sharp, white teeth. "Ah, Adana," he said in a voice that was both mocking and musical. "I have been expecting you." Her grip tightened on the strap of her pouch. "How do you know my name?" He laughed, a sound that sent birds scattering from the trees. "The trees tell me. The wind whispers it." And now you walk into my forest, heading for the cave of whispering stones. Adana stepped back cautiously. I have no quarrel with you. Let me pass. But Akpoko tilted his head. Let you pass? Oh no, my beautiful mountain maiden. Not so fast. The path to the cave is mine to control, and nothing in this world is free. What do you want? She asked. Her voice steady though her heart pounded. He began to circle her like a predator. I deal in exchanges. You give me something, and I give you safe passage. I have nothing of value to give you. Oh, but you do, he said, his gaze lingering on her chest. The thing you hate the most about yourself is the very thing I want. Adana stiffened. You mean? Yes, he said with a sly grin. I want a part of your blessing. One touch, one press of my hand, and I will take away some of it forever. No more whispers, no more stares. You will be like the others. Normal, the word stung. She had wished many times to be normal, to blend in, to not feel the weight of people's eyes on her. But something inside her recoiled. The oracle had called her body a sacred blessing. Was she willing to give part of it away for comfort? If I say no, she asked quietly. Akpoko's grin widened. Then I will send you back the way you came, or perhaps feed you to the shadow beasts that follow me. From the trees came a low growl, and pairs of glowing eyes appeared in the darkness. Adana's heart thudded. She had to make a choice. Give up part of herself to pass easily, or risk danger to keep her blessing whole. She took a deep breath and thought of her mother's words. Let them see your worth, not just your body. Her eyes met Akpoko's. I will not trade what the gods gave me. If you want to stop me, you will have to try. The trickster's smile faded. His eyes narrowed. Very well, he hissed. Let us see if you can walk my forest without losing more than your pride. He raised his staff, and the ground beneath Adana's feet split open, revealing a swirling darkness. The shadow beasts stepped forward, their shapes twisting like smoke, teeth glinting. Adana clenched her fists. The real test had begun. The ground beneath Adana's feet trembled, and the air smelled of wet earth and something sharp, like burnt leaves. The shadow beasts emerged fully now, their bodies half smoke, half flesh, with claws that scraped the ground and eyes that burned like dying embers. Akpoko leaned on his staff, smiling wickedly. Run if you wish, mountain maiden. They will follow. Fight if you dare, but they will bite. Or, give me what I asked for, and they will vanish. Adana's pulse pounded in her ears. Her mother's charm, the small leather pouch, hung at her side. She quickly touched it, feeling for strength in its warmth. Mama Ifioma had whispered before she left. This charm will not fight your battles, but will remind you of who you are. Her voice came out firm. I will not give you anything. My blessing is mine. Akpoko's grin faltered just a little, but he tapped his staff on the ground and the beast lunged. Adana leapt aside just in time, her feet barely missing the swirling pit that yawned open in the earth. She grabbed a fallen branch, thick, heavy, and swung at the first shadow beast. The branch passed through its smoky body, but the creature howled in pain, its form flickering. She realized then they are half spirit, half flesh. If she struck where the flesh was solid, she could harm them. The next beast leapt at her, claws outstretched. She ducked, rolled, and struck its leg, the crack of bone mixing with another pained howl. Her breath came in quick bursts, but she refused to slow down. Akpoko watched with narrowed eyes. You fight like a woman who has been mocked her whole life, he said. All that pain, you turn it into fire, but fire burns out. Another beast lunged from her blind side. She barely had time to react, but just then, the charm at her side grew warm, hot even, and a sudden vision flashed in her mind. The path ahead, lined with carved stones that glowed faintly in the dark. She understood. If she could reach that path, she would be beyond Akpoko's power. Gripping the branch, she broke into a sprint, dodging the snapping jaws of the shadow beasts. The ground shook with their pursuit. The trickster's voice followed her, sharp and cold. Run, Adana, but remember, every step you take, I am still watching. She pushed harder, leaping over roots and ducking low branches until the trees thinned and the glowing stones came into view. The moment she stepped onto the path, The beasts froze, snarling but unable to cross. Akpoko appeared at the edge of the path, his yellow eyes glowing brighter. "You have passed this test," he said slowly. "But the cave of whispering stones will demand more than courage. It will demand truth. And truth can cut deeper than shame." Adana didn't respond. She only kept walking, the stones lighting her way deeper into the forest. The further she went, the more the air changed. It became cool, heavy, and filled with a faint echo, like whispers dancing just beyond hearing. She knew she was close. And then, at last, she saw it, the mouth of the cave. It was a jagged opening in the hillside, rimmed with stones that pulsed faintly like beating hearts. The whispers were clearer now, words in a language she didn't understand. But as she stepped toward it, a figure emerged from the shadows inside. It was a woman who looked exactly like Adana. The woman stepped fully into the light of the glowing stones, and Adana's breath caught in her throat. She was looking at herself. Same dark, smooth skin, same strong arms, same proud eyes. Even the curve of her chest was identical. But there was something different. This other Adana's face carried no trace of the pain, shame, or doubt that had often clouded her own. Her smile was steady, her shoulders relaxed, her presence commanding. "Who are you?" Adana asked, gripping the strap of her pouch. The double tilted her head. "I am you," she said calmly. "Or rather, the you were meant to be before you let their laughter and words bend your spine." Adana frowned. "I don't understand." The woman walked closer, her bare feet silent on the cave floor. "The cave of whispering stones shows truth. And the truth, Adana, is that your blessing was never a curse until you believed their lies. You have carried the weight of their mockery like a chain. The cave will not give you the sacred water unless you break it." Adana's throat tightened. "And how do I do that?" The double's eyes gleamed. "By speaking the one truth you fear to say out loud to yourself." Before Adana could reply, the walls of the cave shivered and the glowing stones dimmed. From the darkness behind her double came a low rumble, and a massive shadow uncoiled itself. A serpent, as wide as a tree trunk, its scales glistening like wet obsidian. Its eyes burned a deep, dangerous red. The double spoke again, her voice calm even as the serpent's filled the air. "This is Aniagu, the guardian of truth. If you cannot say your truth, it will strike. If you do, it will allow you to take the water." Adana's heart pounded. The serpent slithered closer, its head swaying side to side, tasting the air. The double stepped back, leaving her alone in the creature's gaze. "What truth?" Adana asked, her voice trembling. "The truth you've hidden even from yourself," the double said, her voice echoing strangely now. "Say it, and mean it." Adana's palms were slick with sweat. She thought of all the years she had wished she was different, all the times she'd heard snickers in the market, all the cruel jokes. Even the prince's voice in her head, mocking her before the crowd. The serpent moved closer, its breath hot and foul. Its head was now level with hers. And in that moment, Adana's voice broke free, loud and shaking. "I am not ashamed of my body. I am not ashamed of me." The serpent froze. The glowing stones flared brighter. The double smiled. "Again," she urged. Adana's voice grew stronger. "I am not what they call me. I am what the gods made me." The serpent let out a deep, rumbling sound, not of anger, but of retreat. It lowered its head to the ground, coiling back into the shadows. The cave filled with light, so bright it made her squint. When her eyes adjusted, the double was gone. In her place was a small, shallow pool of crystal-clear water at the base of the largest glowing stone. Adana approached, kneeling beside it. She dipped her calabash into the water. It felt cool, almost alive, humming faintly against her palms. She knew this was the cure. But as she rose to leave, a thought struck her. Returning with this water would save the prince. But it would also mean going back to the palace, standing before the very man who had broken her spirit in front of everyone. Would she give it freely? Would she demand something in return? Or would she let him face the consequence of his own pride? She stood at the mouth of the cave, the calabash heavy in her hands, the decision heavier still. And somewhere, far off, the sound of the palace gong began to ring again, urgent and desperate. The palace gong echoed through the air like a heartbeat of dread. Gong! 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 Adana stood at the edge of the forest path, the calabash of sacred water cradled in her arms. The liquid shimmered under the sunlight, as though it held its own light inside. Every step toward the village felt heavier, not because of the journey, but because of the decision pressing on her chest. The prince's mocking words still rang in her mind, the laughter of the crowd, the humiliation she had endured in silence. She could heal him, but should she? As she walked, memories flickered. Her mother's soft voice saying, "The gods have their ways of teaching lessons." The oracle's warning, the serpent's eyes, the double's unwavering gaze. By the time the palace gates came into view, a crowd had gathered outside. News traveled faster than harm in Amuka. Whispers floated through the air. "She's back." "Does she have it? Will she save him?" The royal guards rushed forward, their spears gleaming. "Adana, you must hurry. His breathing is weak, and the elders fear he will not see the sunset." Inside the palace, the atmosphere was suffocating. The prince lay on his bed, his lips pale, his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. His eyes fluttered open at the sound of her footsteps. For the first time, he looked at her without a trace of arrogance. "Adana." His voice cracked, barely more than a whisper. "Please." The elders gathered around, their faces tense. The oldest among them stepped forward. "Daughter of Okoro, you have done what no one else could. The life of the prince is in your hands now. Give him the water." But Adana did not move. She looked directly at the prince. "Before I give this," she said, her voice strong, "I need to know. Why should I?" Gasps rippled through the room. The queen mother frowned. "Girl, this is no time for—" "No," Adana interrupted, her eyes never leaving the prince. "He shamed me before the whole village. Turned my body into a joke." His words were poison. "Why should I save the one who made me feel less than human?" The prince's face twisted with shame. He tried to sit up, but winced from the pain. "Because," his voice was hoarse, "because I was a fool. I saw your blessing as something to mock instead of honor. I wanted to show off my wit, but all I showed was my pride. I have learned, and I am sorry." Adana searched his eyes for any sign of deceit. There was none, only raw desperation and regret. Still, she was not finished. "If I save you," she said slowly, "you will stand before the whole kingdom and take back your words. You will tell them the truth, that my body is not a shame, but a blessing. You will speak for every girl and woman who has been mocked for what she cannot change." The prince's throat worked as he swallowed. "I will," he said, his voice trembling. "I swear it before the gods." The elders murmured among themselves. The queen mother gave a slow nod. Adana stepped closer, holding the calabash over his lips. "Then drink." The sacred water touched his mouth, and the change was immediate. Color returned to his cheeks. His breathing deepened. His eyes grew clear and alert. Within moments, he sat up fully, staring at her in disbelief. "You saved me," he said quietly. Adana stepped back, her expression unreadable. "The gods saved you. I only carried their gift." But outside the palace walls, the news was spreading fast. Adana had returned victorious. And tomorrow, the prince would stand before all to fulfill his promise. Yet that night, as Adana lay in her bed, a troubling thought came. The prince had sworn to honor her before the whole kingdom. But would he truly keep his word, or would his pride return once his strength did? Only the morning would tell. The morning sun rose golden over Amuka, painting the village in soft light. But the air was thick with anticipation. Every villager, from the youngest child to the oldest elder, made their way to the palace square. Word had spread like wildfire. Prince Obina would speak publicly about Adana and what she had done. Some came out of curiosity, eager to see if the proud prince would actually lower himself before a common woman. Others came to witness what many quietly called the justice of the gods. Adana stood at the edge of the crowd with her family. She wore a fresh wrapper, deep blue, her head held high. The elders had insisted she sit near the royal dais, but she had refused. "Let me stand with my people," she had said. "If he speaks the truth, they will hear it here. The royal drums began to beat, a slow, steady rhythm that made the ground vibrate. The palace gates opened, and the prince stepped out, flanked by guards. He wore no crown, no gold embroidery, just a simple white robe. His face was calm, but his eyes revealed a heavy weight. He walked to the center of the square, raised his hand for silence, and began to speak. "People of Amuka," his voice rang out, "I stand before you not as your prince, but as a man who has been wrong." A murmur ran through the crowd. "I mocked a woman for the body the gods gave her," he continued. "I turned what was sacred into something to be laughed at. My pride blinded me. And for this, I was cursed, my life hanging by a thread." He glanced toward Adana. She met his gaze but did not smile. "This woman," he said, pointing to her, "had every reason to let me die, but she did not. She faced danger, trials, and humiliation to bring me the cure. She saved my life, and in doing so, she taught me a lesson no crown, no war, no journey could teach, that the worth of a person is not in how they look, but in the heart they carry." The square was silent now. Even the children stopped fidgeting. "I say this to every man, woman, and child," the prince declared, his voice rising. "Mocking someone for what they cannot change is not wit. It is weakness. And I vow, before the gods and before you all, that from this day forward, no woman in this kingdom will be shamed for the body she was given. Any who do will answer to me." Then, in a gesture that no one in the history of Amuka had ever seen, the prince walked into the crowd, straight to where Adana stood. He sank to his knees before her. "Adana, daughter of Okoro," he said, his voice trembling but loud enough for all to hear, "I beg your forgiveness." Gasps and murmurs filled the air. The image was powerful. The heir to the throne kneeling before a common woman he had once ridiculed. Adana studied him for a long moment. "I forgive you," she said finally, her voice steady. "But remember, words can heal and words can wound. Choose yours carefully from now on." The prince bowed his head. "I will." The crowd erupted in cheers, not just for the prince's humility, but for the justice they had witnessed. Some of the women even began to chant Adana's name, and others joined in until the sound filled the square. From that day on, the story of Adana was told under the udala tree, passed from elder to child, not just as a tale of a woman who saved a prince, but as a lesson of a kingdom that learned humility and respect. And whenever someone began to laugh at another's appearance, there was always someone nearby to say, "Remember Adana."